Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is by Private Reserve, Ebony-Green, which actually, the first time I got a sample of this, I was really excited to use it, and when I opened it, it was full of mold. So, yeah. Luckily, I got another sample before I decided to test it. It's a very dark green, as the name would imply. You know, ebony green. All the tests were done with this JinHao X450 with a fairly broad and fairly wet nib. Anyways, and this Hero 616 with an actually quite very fine nib. So, thought I'd do some ink comparisons. Here you have a Noodler's General of the Armies, which, you know, it's supposed to like change color and like get dark and stuff. I don't know, every time I use it, it just stays this really light green with lots of light blue in it. But so I thought maybe like over time. Anyways, Diatramentis is black green. Here's ebony green right here. Look at all that sheen. I mean, whoa. But Diatramentis Charles Dickens and Noodler's Bad Green Gator. And all of them, I tested it with water, ammonia, alcohol, like grain alcohol, you know, like you have to get at a hardware store, and bleach. And as you can see, the bleach decimated it. The water washed a lot of the saturation away. The ammonia affected it a bit, the alcohol almost not at all. Now let's check out the chromatography. You can see, like, you know, from this like light blue sort of thing down at the bottom where the initial drop was, but a lot of it really just flees from water. And, you know, it's just green, green, and more green until it gets into almost a black. And the dried test, which is not how you're supposed to do it, but I've been doing it lately anyway, just to see what it'll reveal. And what it reveals is it makes no difference. Yeah, so. Paper test, top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Yep, it's a dark, dark green, right? And I hope I'll be able to get this on camera. Oh, there it is. Okay, watch through here. See all that? You see all that sheen? See the shiny, shiny? And it's all throughout. And I mean, it's in the scrubby too, but mostly at the edges. It's actually, for once, it's almost easier to capture it in the words. But anyways, it's like a dark red sheen. There is some shading, but it's somewhat hidden just because the ink is so dark. The very fine nib took 5.5 seconds. The broad and wet one took 27. But I mean, like I said, it's a very broad, very wet nib, and this is very dense paper. Yeah, and part of what causes sheen is saturation, which means like the amount of, you know, ink or dye or pigment to the ratio of water within the ink. And something that's heavily saturated has a lot more of that not water in it. And that, you know, it almost like piles up on the paper, and when it dries, it's all sort of just sitting there, and some of it can be reflective. Anyways, moving on. No bleed, no feather, no spread. Very well behaved. Not really any echo, but this is very dense paper. But this is a very dark ink, so not too bad. And as you can see in the water test, it absolutely fled from water. I mean, here in the broad, you can see a little bit of what was left, but really not much. Next is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where, I mean, again, you have sheen like everywhere. You know, like you'll see it just like all throughout. It's a very sheeny ink, but yeah, the dry time in the broader nib was 25 seconds. In the very fine nib was 4. It's such a deep, rich green. It's a lovely color. I said there was freakish bleeding in spots just through here, but I think I might have actually put that down on the previous page. And anyways, yeah, very well behaved. I said there's freakish feathering, but I actually can't find it now that it's dried. So Yeah, I don't actually see any feathering, but anyways, there's lots of sheen. There is some echo, but it's such a dark ink. I feel like that's something you should take into consideration. Again, water test just absolutely decimated it. And again, in the broad, there's a bit more left than in the very fine nib, but... Next is Tomoe River Paper, where, as expected, there's just... I mean, this ink just like vomited sheen all over the place. I mean, it is just everywhere. Everywhere. Look at all that. I mean, it touches every single letter. But, yeah. I mean, saturated inks also tend to have longer dry times, and this ink is, or I mean, this paper is very ink resistant as it is, so there were some jumps in dry time. The very fine nib took 8 seconds, and the broad wet nib, I stopped counting after 30. It was pretty close to 30, but still took more than 30 seconds to dry. And I said that it's a great combination if you have patience. Personally, I might, just because of how good this looks and all this sheen, and it's a wonderful deep rich green color. But yeah, no bleed, no feather, no spread. Absolutely murdered the water test. Or I mean, the water test murdered it, I guess I should say. Because that is just gone. And again, this is an extremely fine paper. And this is an extremely dark ink, so I think the show through sort of should be expected. Next is the world's worst copier paper, where I did separate tests for each pen. And as you can see in the broad and wet pen, it didn't do very well. There's really no shading left. There's a lot of spread. I mean, look at how fat those lines got. 6 seconds to dry. There's no sheen left. It's a disaster. And I mean, look at how the paper reacted. Like, you can see that it was starting to like mush in on itself. But anyways, there's some left, but it bled and it exploded and it feathered, and it would not be the easiest thing to recover. That's a lot of bleed. In the Hero 616, there was still an enormous amount of, comparatively, you know, to the original nib size, a lot of spread. There was a great deal of feathering. There's no shading. It dried almost instantly, but, I mean, that's insane. And look at the water test. I mean, there you can really see where the water was just, like, mushing in on itself. It seriously dyed and look, it started acting like chromatography paper. But it feathered, it exploded, it was just all bad all over the place always. So, next is Mead Notebook Paper, where again I used both. And actually the fine nib really didn't do too bad. You know, there were some problems, but really not as bad as some we've seen on this paper, and of course better than the broad JinHao, where you can see there is some feathering and some spread. 2.5 seconds for the very fine nib and 4.5 for the broad. Said there is bleeding and feathering and spread seen throughout, but could be a lot worse. And do you see how patchy that is? It's like just through here that you really see the bleed. It makes me think maybe there's something up with this paper. Like maybe it got put down in something. I don't know. But water test was a disaster. Lots of bleed. Feathered, exploded, dyed the page. That would be hard to recover. Now this is that inaccurately well-behaved Moleskine notebook paper, which I assure you I have once again moved away from. But anyways, on here you can see how shiny the back of these pages are. Anyways, here it was well-behaved. Here there's, you know, even sheen, even in the very fine nib, and yeah, take this with many grains of salt, but here there was no bleed, no feather, no spread. The water test was pretty decimated. I may have to retest this ink. Anyways, there you go. There's Private Reserve Ebony-Green. I really like it. It has some long dry times, but it sheens like crazy. The flow for such a saturated ink is like, it's pretty good. I'd say it's like a 5 out of 10. You know, just like nice and steady. You know, it's not like gushing out of an ink and you don't have to fight it out of a pen. So, yeah, wonderfully dark, rich green. Really enjoyed it. As you might be able to tell, I actually got 2 samples and put them together. But, yeah, so fantastic dark green ink. For your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.